Ethan Montgomery dropped his phone when he saw what was happening on the security camera. For a second, he thought he was hallucinating. He actually rubbed his eyes and looked again. But the image on the screen didn't change. His 7-year-old twins were eating. Olivia reached for a piece of bread. Owen lifted a spoon to his mouth. Slowly, carefully, but they were eating. And after 7 days of complete refusal, it felt impossible. Ethan stood frozen in his home office, unable to breathe. Doctors had warned him that the children could not continue like this. Therapists had exhausted every strategy. Nutrition specialists had come and gone. Nothing worked. For an entire week, the twins had refused every meal placed in front of them. They barely spoke, barely looked at anyone. And now, somehow, at nearly 10 o'clock at night, they were sitting calmly at the dining room table sharing food. But that wasn't what stunned Ethan most. What stunned him was the woman sitting across from them. Naomi Brooks, the new maid. She wasn't feeding them. She wasn't convincing them. She wasn't even speaking. Instead, she sat quietly with tears in her eyes as the children stared at something resting in the middle of the table. Ethan leaned closer to the monitor. His pulse began pounding in his ears. Whatever Naomi had placed there seemed more important to the twins than the food itself. Olivia looked down at it and started crying. Owen squeezed his sister's hand. Then both children took another bite. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the zoom control. But before the camera image sharpened, Naomi gently slid the object out of view. The mystery vanished. Ethan pushed back from his desk so fast his chair slammed into the wall. He rushed from the office and moved through the silent mansion, his expensive dress shoes striking the hardwood floors. The house had felt like a tomb ever since his wife died 3 months earlier. 40,000 square feet of luxury. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Endless hallways. Yet somehow it felt emptier every day. Especially after Olivia and Owen stopped eating. Especially after they stopped acting like children. Since the funeral, grief had settled over the house like a storm cloud that refused to leave. Ethan blamed himself for many things. For working too much. For missing warning signs. For not answering the final call his wife had made before everything changed. But none of those regrets hurt as much as watching his children disappear right in front of him. He had money, influence, resources most people could only dream about. Yet none of it could convince 2 broken children to take a single bite of food. Until tonight. Until Naomi. Ethan reached the dining room doorway and stopped. The room was empty. The plates were still there. Half-finished food sat untouched on the table. But Naomi and the twins were gone. Then he noticed something else. A single tear-stained drawing lay abandoned beside one of the chairs. At the center of the page was a picture of 4 people sitting together at a dinner table. Above them, written in a child's handwriting, were 6 words that made Ethan's blood run cold. He stared at the sentence again and again, unable to understand how his children could possibly know what it meant. And even more disturbing, how did Naomi know? The words on the drawing stayed with Ethan long after midnight. He sat alone in his study, staring at the paper under the glow of a single lamp. The handwriting belonged to Olivia. He recognized the careful curves of each letter. Yet the sentence itself felt impossible. It was not something a 7-year-old should have known. Not after everything that had happened. Not after the silence that had swallowed both children for months. Across the mansion, the lights were off. The house was quiet again. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt as if something hidden was moving beneath the surface. Ethan looked toward the framed photograph on his desk. 3 months earlier, his life had been completely different. His wife, Claire Montgomery, had been the center of everything. She was the one who remembered birthdays. The one who stayed up late helping with school projects. The one who could calm Olivia and Owen with a single hug. Ethan had always promised himself that he was working hard for his family. Every business trip, every late meeting, every missed dinner. He told himself it was all for them. But after Claire died unexpectedly, he began noticing things he had never seen before. The children did not run to him when they were scared. They did not come to him when they were sad. They went looking for someone who was no longer there. The realization hurt more than any financial loss he had ever experienced. Around 1 in the morning, Ethan left his office and walked through the upstairs hallway. As he passed the twins' bedroom, he noticed something strange. A faint light was shining beneath the door. He paused. Carefully, he looked inside. Olivia and Owen were awake. They sat cross-legged on the floor between their beds. Neither child noticed him. They were focused on something resting in front of them. It was a small wooden box. The same box Naomi had quietly taken away earlier that evening. Ethan watched as Olivia opened the lid. Owen reached inside and removed a folded piece of paper. Then something happened that made Ethan stop breathing. The twins began speaking to each other. Not with words, not with whispers. With a series of hand movements and gestures they seemed to understand perfectly. They had created their own private language. A language no adult in the house knew existed. Ethan felt his chest tighten. How long had this been happening? How many conversations had his children shared while he remained completely unaware? He stayed frozen in the darkness as Owen unfolded the paper. Both children stared at it for several seconds. Then Olivia started crying again. Owen wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The paper disappeared back into the box. The lid closed. The light switched off. Ethan stepped away before they could see him. The next morning, he called Dr. Rebecca Hayes and described what he had witnessed. The pediatric grief specialist listened carefully before responding with a question that caught him off guard. Had anyone ever searched the contents of the box? Ethan realized nobody had. Not the doctors. Not the therapists. Not even him. Yet somehow Naomi seemed to know exactly what was inside. And when Ethan finally decided to find out for himself, he discovered the box was gone. Along with it, the one secret his children appeared willing to protect more fiercely than their own health. The disappearance of the wooden box should have brought relief. Instead, it made the entire house feel more unsettled. Ethan spent the next 2 days searching for answers, but every question seemed to create 3 more. Naomi never acted suspicious. She continued her work quietly, helping around the mansion, speaking gently with the staff, and somehow earning small pieces of trust from Olivia and Owen that nobody else could reach. Yet whenever Ethan tried to ask about the box, Naomi would lower her eyes and carefully change the subject. It was not defiance. It was almost as if she believed she was protecting something. One rainy afternoon, Ethan returned home earlier than expected. As he walked through the upstairs hallway, he noticed Olivia's bedroom door slightly open. Inside, Naomi sat on the floor beside the twins. They were not playing. They were not talking. Instead, dozens of photographs were spread across the carpet. Family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, ordinary moments frozen in time. Naomi pointed to one photograph and asked a simple question. What was Mommy laughing about here? For the first time in months, Olivia answered without hesitation. The response was quiet, but it was clear. Then Owen added another detail. Soon both children were talking. Not much, not loudly, but enough to make Ethan stop in the hallway. Something about the scene felt important. Naomi was not helping them forget their mother. She was helping them remember her. Later that evening, Margaret, the longtime housekeeper, approached Ethan carrying a small stack of papers she had discovered while organizing a storage closet. They were drawings made by the twins during therapy sessions after Claire's death. Most showed the same recurring image. A dining table. 4 chairs. A family gathered together. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then Ethan noticed one disturbing detail. In every drawing, Claire appeared present. Not as a memory. Not as a photograph. She was seated at the table as though she were still alive. Dr. Hayes examined the drawings. The following morning, her expression grew increasingly serious. She explained that children often process grief through imagination, but something else concerned her. The twins had drawn the exact same image more than 30 times over 3 months. The same table, the same empty plate, the same chair, the same message hidden in different corners of the page. Ethan felt a chill run through him. He had seen those words before. They were similar to the sentence written on the drawing he found after the mysterious dinner. Before he could ask more questions, Dr. Hayes revealed another troubling discovery. Several therapy notes mentioned a recurring belief shared by both children. A belief they refused to explain fully. According to the notes, Olivia and Owen seemed convinced that if certain memories disappeared, something terrible would happen to their mother. Nobody understood what they meant. Not the therapists. Not the doctors. Not even Dr. Hayes. That night, Ethan sat alone reviewing the files. Page after page described fear, guilt, and confusion. Then one sentence stopped him cold. It had been written by a therapist nearly 2 months earlier. The note read, "The children repeatedly reference a message that has not yet been heard." Ethan stared at the words for a long time. Somewhere inside the mansion, a secret message existed. The twins knew about it. Naomi somehow knew about it. And suddenly Ethan realized that whatever was hidden inside the missing wooden box might not be the mystery itself. It might only be the key to something far more important. Over the following week, something unexpected began happening inside the Montgomery mansion. The atmosphere remained heavy with grief, but for the first time since Claire's death, small signs of life started returning. Not because the pain was gone, not because the questions had been answered, but because someone had finally stopped trying to fix the twins and had simply chosen to sit beside them. Naomi spent hours with Olivia and Owen without asking them to explain their sadness. She did not pressure them to move on. She did not tell them everything would be okay. Instead, she listened. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in silence. And somehow, that silence felt different from the one that had haunted the house for months. One afternoon, Naomi found the twins in the garden behind the estate. They were sitting beneath an old maple tree that Claire had planted years earlier. The children seemed unusually quiet. After several minutes, Olivia finally spoke. She asked Naomi a question no adult had ever heard before. She asked if people could disappear twice. Naomi did not answer immediately. She simply asked what she meant. Olivia looked down at the grass and explained that losing someone once was terrible, but forgetting them felt like losing them all over again. Naomi felt her heart break, because for the first time, she began to understand the fear hiding beneath the children's grief. Later that day, Naomi shared something from her own past. She told them about her younger brother. She told them how she had spent years terrified that his memory would fade. She admitted that there were moments when she could barely remember the sound of his voice. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Owen quietly moved closer. Neither child had ever heard an adult speak honestly about loss without trying to wrap it in comforting answers. For the first time, they realized they were not alone. That evening, Ethan noticed another small change. The twins joined him at dinner. They did not eat much, only a few bites, but they sat at the table voluntarily. It was the first family meal since Claire's funeral. Ethan wanted to celebrate. He wanted to ask questions. Instead, he remained quiet, afraid the fragile progress might disappear if he pushed too hard. Across the table, Naomi offered him a subtle glance that seemed to say the same thing. Be patient. The breakthrough continued over the next few days. Olivia began drawing again. Owen started reading books he had abandoned months earlier. Yet beneath the improvement, something still felt unresolved. One evening, while helping the children organize old art supplies, Naomi discovered a folded piece of paper hidden inside a sketchbook. It was not a drawing. It was a list. A carefully written list in Claire's handwriting. At first glance it appeared ordinary. Simple reminders. Grocery items. Household notes. Then Naomi noticed something unusual. Several words were circled. Not once. Multiple times. When she read those words in sequence, they formed a sentence. A sentence that made no sense on its own. A sentence that sounded more like a clue than a reminder. Naomi stared at the page for several minutes. The message was clearly intentional. Someone had hidden it there. But why? And more importantly, had Claire left it before her death? Or had she known someone would eventually need to find it? Naomi did not tell anyone about the strange sentence hidden inside Claire's handwritten list. Not at first. Something about it felt deeply personal, as if she had accidentally stepped into a conversation that had begun long before she arrived at the Montgomery estate. Instead of showing the paper to Ethan immediately, she spent several days quietly observing the twins. She wanted to understand what connected the hidden message to the fear that still lived inside them. The answer arrived in an unexpected way. One Saturday morning, Olivia asked if she could visit the attic. The request surprised everyone. Since Claire's death, the twins had avoided most areas of the house connected to old family memories. Yet now both children seemed determined. Ethan agreed, and Naomi accompanied them upstairs. The attic contained dozens of sealed boxes, old holiday decorations, forgotten furniture, and years of family keepsakes. For nearly an hour, the twins searched without explaining what they were looking for. Then Owen suddenly stopped beside an old cedar chest. His small hands trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside were photo albums, birthday cards, and several home videotapes from years earlier. Olivia smiled for the first time in weeks. A real smile. Not forced. Not fragile. Hope flickered across her face like sunlight breaking through clouds. That afternoon, Naomi helped them watch some of the recordings. The videos showed ordinary moments. Family cookouts. beach vacations, school performances, Claire laughing while chasing the children across a backyard. Ethan joined them reluctantly at first. The memories hurt. Too much. Yet as the hours passed, something remarkable happened. The twins began telling stories. They remembered details nobody else had noticed. Favorite songs, funny mistakes, private family jokes. For the first time since the tragedy, their mother's memory felt less like a source of pain and more like a living part of their family history. Ethan watched in amazement. The children were not sinking deeper into grief. They were becoming stronger. Later that evening, Olivia made a comment that caught Naomi's attention. She casually mentioned that their mother used to leave little treasure hunts around the house. Hidden notes, small clues, secret messages that led to surprises. Naomi's mind immediately returned to the mysterious sentence hidden inside the handwritten list. Suddenly, it seemed possible that Claire had been doing something similar. Not for fun, for a reason. The next day, Naomi carefully examined several boxes from the attic. What she discovered sent a chill through her. Hidden among old greeting cards were 3 separate notes written by Claire. At first glance, each note appeared ordinary, but certain words were underlined in a way that felt intentional. When Naomi copied those words onto a separate sheet of paper, another incomplete message emerged. It was not enough to understand the full meaning, but one phrase stood out clearly. Find what was never opened. Naomi stared at the sentence for a long time. Somewhere inside the house, Claire had left a trail. Not random memories, not accidental markings. A trail designed to lead someone toward something important. Yet one troubling question refused to leave Naomi's mind. If Claire had truly hidden these clues before her death, who was she expecting to find them? And why had the twins seemed to know about the search long before anyone else? For the first time in months, hope had entered the Montgomery mansion. That should have brought peace. Instead, it brought tension. Because hope is dangerous when people are still carrying wounds they do not understand. Naomi knew she was getting closer to something important. The hidden clues, the unfinished messages, the strange trail Claire appeared to have left behind. None of it felt accidental anymore. Yet every step forward seemed to create new problems. The biggest problem was Ethan. At first, he had welcomed the changes in his children. Olivia was laughing more. Owen was speaking more. They were eating regularly again. But as the twins grew closer to Naomi, Ethan began noticing something that unsettled him. They shared things with her that they refused to share with him. Questions that went unanswered for months were suddenly answered when Naomi asked them. Secrets they guarded fiercely seemed to soften in her presence. And although Ethan never admitted it aloud, a painful thought began taking root. Naomi was becoming the person his children trusted most. One evening, that fear finally surfaced. Ethan returned home after a difficult day at the office and discovered Naomi helping the twins rearrange a small room that had once belonged to Claire. Boxes of personal belongings were spread across the floor. Family photographs lined the walls. Candles sat on shelves beside old journals and keepsakes. The room looked less like storage and more like a living memorial. Ethan froze in the doorway. His expression hardened immediately. He had spent months keeping that room closed because opening it felt unbearable. Yet now Naomi had brought the children inside. Olivia and Owen looked happier than he had seen them in months, but Ethan could not see that. All he saw was someone crossing boundaries he never gave permission to cross. His voice was sharper than anyone expected. He demanded to know what was happening. The twins instantly fell silent. Naomi calmly explained that the children needed a safe place to remember their mother without fear. Ethan barely listened. Grief, exhaustion, and guilt collided inside him. He accused Naomi of interfering in matters she did not understand. He accused her of encouraging unhealthy attachments to the past. The room fell completely quiet. Then something unexpected happened. Owen stepped between them. The 7-year-old looked directly at his father and spoke with more confidence than he had shown in months. He said they were not trying to stay in the past. They were trying not to lose it. The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Yet instead of softening him, they made him angrier. Because somewhere deep down, he feared his son might be right. Later that night, Naomi made a decision. Against her better judgment, she revealed the hidden sentence she had discovered inside Claire's notes. Ethan stared at the paper. His eyes narrowed. Rather than seeing a clue, he saw manipulation. Coincidences. Wishful thinking. He told Naomi she was turning grief into a scavenger hunt. He warned her to stop involving the children. Naomi left the conversation shaken. For the first time since arriving, she questioned herself. Had she gone too far? Had she mistaken hope for truth? But the next morning, everything changed again. Olivia quietly approached Naomi before breakfast and handed her a folded page torn from an old notebook. There was only one sentence written across it. The handwriting belonged to Claire, and beneath the sentence was a date. A date exactly 1 week before her death. Suddenly, the trail no longer looked like imagination. It looked like preparation. The question was no longer whether Claire had hidden something. The question was what she knew was coming. The date on the note changed everything. Not because it answered any questions, but because it made the mystery impossible to ignore. For Naomi, it felt like proof that Claire had intentionally left something behind. For Ethan, it felt like something far more dangerous. It felt like the beginning of an obsession that was pulling his children deeper into grief instead of helping them heal. Over the next several days, the tension inside the mansion became impossible to hide. Ethan and Naomi barely spoke. Every conversation ended with disagreement. Every small discovery seemed to widen the distance between them. The twins felt it too. Olivia became quieter. Owen started watching every interaction between the adults with growing anxiety. The fragile sense of safety they had begun rebuilding suddenly felt threatened. Then came the moment that shattered everything. One afternoon, Ethan returned home unexpectedly after a canceled business meeting. As he entered the east wing of the house, he heard voices coming from a room that had remained locked since Claire's funeral. His heart immediately tightened. The room contained some of Claire's most personal belongings: journals, letters, family keepsakes. Ethan had never allowed anyone inside, not even himself. Yet when he opened the door, he found Naomi sitting with the twins on the floor surrounded by old memory boxes. Olivia was holding a photograph against her chest. Owen had tears running down his face. Naomi was reading something aloud. Ethan never heard the words. The sight alone was enough. Months of grief, guilt, exhaustion, and fear exploded at once. He demanded to know who had opened the room. Naomi tried to explain. She told him the children had found the key themselves. She told him they needed answers. She told him they were finally beginning to process their pain. But Ethan was no longer listening. In that moment, all he could see was someone stepping into places he could not bear to enter himself. The argument that followed shook the entire house. Olivia started crying. Owen begged them to stop. Margaret and Charles rushed into the hallway. Yet nothing could calm Ethan's anger. Finally, he made a decision that stunned everyone. He fired Naomi. Immediately, the words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Naomi stood completely still. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Olivia let out a sound Ethan would never forget. It was not anger. It was heartbreak. Pure heartbreak. Owen grabbed Naomi's hand and refused to let go. The children pleaded with their father. But Ethan had convinced himself he was protecting them. Naomi quietly packed her things that evening. Before leaving, she knelt beside the twins one final time. She told them they were stronger than they believed. She told them not to stop telling the truth, even when adults were afraid to hear it. Then she walked out of the mansion. The next morning, the progress of the previous weeks vanished almost instantly. Olivia refused breakfast. Owen stayed locked in his room. Neither child spoke during the entire day. The laughter disappeared. The conversation stopped. It was as if the light that had slowly returned to the house had been switched off. Even Ethan could see it. Yet pride and fear kept him from admitting what he had done. Late that night, unable to sleep, he wandered into the room where the confrontation had happened. The memory boxes remained scattered across the floor. Most contained ordinary family keepsakes. But one small envelope had fallen behind a shelf. Ethan picked it up and froze. Written across the front in Claire's unmistakable handwriting were 5 words that made his stomach drop. Not until Ethan is ready. For the first time since firing Naomi, a terrifying possibility entered his mind. What if the person standing in the way of the truth had never been Naomi at all? For a long time, Ethan sat alone staring at the envelope in his hands. The mansion around him felt hollow. Too quiet. Too empty. The same silence that had haunted his children was now beginning to surround him as well. He carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded page. Not a goodbye letter. Not a confession. Something far more unexpected. It was a list of dates. Nothing else. No explanation. No instructions. Just dates written in Claire's handwriting. At first they meant nothing. But as Ethan studied them more closely, he noticed something strange. Every date matched one of the clues that had appeared throughout the house. The note Naomi found, the hidden messages, the unusual markings. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Claire had been leaving breadcrumbs for months before her death. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Why would she do that? What was she trying to prepare them for? The next morning, he did something he had avoided for weeks. He called Naomi. At first, she did not answer. Then several hours later, she finally returned the call. Ethan struggled to find the words. Pride made the apology difficult. Guilt made it worse. Yet Naomi listened patiently. She did not sound angry. She sounded tired. When Ethan explained what he had found, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Naomi quietly asked him a question. Had he ever listened to every recording Claire left behind? Ethan immediately said yes. But the answer felt hollow even as he spoke it. Because suddenly he was not certain anymore. Later that day, Margaret brought him a storage box she had recently discovered in the basement archives. It contained family documents, old electronics, and several memory drives that had never been cataloged. Most held ordinary family photographs. Then Ethan found something that made his hands shake. A video file dated only 12 days before Claire's death. He had never seen it before. The recording began with Claire sitting alone in the family sunroom. She looked healthy, calm, almost peaceful. For several moments, she simply smiled at the camera. Then she began speaking. Not about illness, not about fear. She spoke about family, about memories, about how easy it was for people to assume that love would always have another day. Ethan could barely breathe. The words felt personal, intimate, as though she were speaking directly to him. Then came the twist that changed everything. Claire revealed that she had been keeping a journal of things she wanted Ethan to notice about the twins. Small details, small fears, small dreams, moments she worried he was missing because work consumed so much of his attention. She never sounded angry. She sounded heartbroken. Ethan paused the video and lowered his head. Suddenly, dozens of memories flooded back. School events he missed, family dinners he canceled, bedtime stories he promised to read later. The realization hit harder than any accusation ever could. Claire had not been hiding clues to solve a mystery. She had been trying to save something much more fragile, his relationship with his children. Yet the video was not complete. It ended abruptly in the middle of a sentence. The final seconds showed Claire reaching toward the camera before the recording cut off. There should have been more. Ethan searched through the files again and again. Then he noticed something unusual. The video was labeled Part 1. His pulse quickened. Somewhere there was a second recording. A recording that might explain everything. But if Claire wanted Ethan to find it, why had she hidden it so carefully? And what truth was waiting at the end of the trail she had spent months creating? After discovering that the recording was only the first part of a larger message, Ethan stopped thinking like a businessman searching for answers and started thinking like a father who had run out of time. For weeks he had chased clues. Now he began seeing something much more painful. Every clue pointed back to the same truth. Claire had never been trying to create a mystery. She had been trying to reach him. The realization followed him everywhere. He saw it in the empty chair at the dinner table. He saw it in the untouched family calendar hanging in the kitchen. He saw it in the twins, who had become experts at hiding pain while the adults around them searched for explanations. Determined to finish what Claire had started, Ethan spent the next several days examining every family keepsake, every memory drive, every notebook stored throughout the estate. Margaret and Charles quietly helped him. Even Dr. Hayes became involved. Slowly, the missing pieces began connecting. The notes, the dates, the hidden phrases, the recordings. None of them were random. Together, they formed a timeline documenting Claire's growing concern that grief was not the greatest danger facing the family. This connection was. Then another discovery changed everything again. Inside an old scrapbook, Ethan found a sealed envelope addressed to Olivia and Owen. Unlike the other clues, this one had never been hidden. It had simply been overlooked. The twins had apparently found it weeks earlier, but never opened it. When Ethan gently asked why, Olivia finally answered. Her voice trembled as she explained something that broke his heart. The children believed that opening the letter would mean accepting that their mother was truly gone. As long as the envelope remained sealed, part of her still felt close. Suddenly, Ethan understood the fear that had controlled them for months. They were not refusing life. They were protecting love. Every strange behavior, every hidden conversation, every tear, Every step of the journey suddenly looked different. Later that evening, Ethan made a choice he would have avoided in the past. He drove across town to meet Naomi in person. There was no argument this time. No pride. No defensiveness. For the first time, he listened. Naomi explained that the twins had never needed someone to erase their grief. They needed permission to carry it without being trapped by it. She told Ethan that children often blame themselves for losses they cannot understand. They create impossible responsibilities, impossible promises, and sometimes they believe they must protect the memory of someone they love at the cost of their own happiness. Ethan sat in silence, because deep inside, he knew he had done the same thing. He had buried himself in work because staying busy felt easier than feeling broken. The next morning, he returned home with a new sense of purpose. For the first time, he sat with Olivia and Owen without asking questions, without offering solutions, without trying to fix anything. They talked for hours. About Claire, about memories, about fears, about things they had never said aloud. Then, just before bedtime, Owen quietly reached into a drawer and removed an object nobody had seen in weeks. The missing wooden box. He placed it in front of his father. This time, he did not pull it away. Olivia opened the lid. Inside rested several family keepsakes and one final item. A small key attached to a handwritten tag. Ethan read the words and felt his heart begin to race. The key belonged to a safety deposit box Claire had rented 6 months before her death. And written beneath the box number were the words that finally confirmed everything. This is where the last message is waiting. The following morning, Ethan, Olivia, Owen, and Naomi stood together inside a quiet bank office as a manager placed a small metal box on the table in front of them. Nobody spoke. The journey that had begun with confusion, grief, and hidden clues had led them here. Ethan's hands trembled as he inserted the key. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he opened the box. Inside were only a few items. A family photograph, a handwritten journal, and a flash drive labeled in Claire's handwriting. For my family. The manager left the room, giving them privacy. Ethan connected the drive to a laptop. The final recording appeared on the screen. Claire smiled gently, just as she had in the earlier video. But this time there was no mystery in her eyes. Only love. She explained that she had begun creating the messages after realizing how fragile time truly was. She had not known exactly what the future would bring. She had not been hiding a secret illness or predicting tragedy. She simply understood something many people forget. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Claire spoke directly to Ethan. She told him she never doubted his love for the twins. What worried her was how often life distracted him from showing that love. She explained that children do not measure love by opportunities, houses, or bank accounts. They measure it by presence, by attention, by shared moments. Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he listened. Then Claire addressed Olivia and Owen. She told them something they desperately needed to hear. Their happiness would never erase her memory. Their laughter would never replace her. Their future would never be a betrayal of her love. She wanted them to live fully, to grow, to dream, to laugh without guilt, to carry her with them, not carry the weight of losing her. Suddenly everything made sense. The fear that had trapped the twins, the hidden messages, the clues, the unopened memories. They had spent months believing they were responsible for protecting their mother's existence. Claire had spent months preparing a way to free them from that burden. By the time the recording ended, nobody in the room was untouched. Olivia quietly moved closer to her father. Owen took Ethan's hand. For the first time since Claire's death, Ethan did not pull away from his emotions. He wrapped his arms around both children and cried openly. Not because he was losing them, because he had almost lost the chance to truly know them. Days later, Ethan made another important decision. He returned to the mansion and formally asked Naomi to come back. Not as a maid who worked for the family, as someone who had become part of it. In front of Margaret, Charles, Dr. Hayes, and the twins, he apologized. He admitted that his fear had blinded him. He thanked her for seeing what everyone else had missed. Most importantly, he thanked her for staying when it would have been easier to walk away. Naomi accepted with her usual quiet grace. She never claimed credit for healing anyone. She simply reminded them that healing happens when people feel seen, heard, and loved. Several weeks later, the Montgomery dining room looked very different. The silence was gone. Olivia and Owen laughed as they argued over dessert. Ethan listened to their stories instead of checking his phone. Naomi smiled from across the table, while Margaret and Charles shared knowing glances. One chair remained empty. Claire's chair. Nobody tried to pretend the loss had disappeared. But the empty chair no longer represented pain alone. It represented love that continued long after someone was gone. As the evening sunlight filled the room, Ethan looked around at the family he almost lost and finally understood the lesson Claire had tried so hard to teach him. Money could build a mansion. It could buy comfort, security, and opportunity. But it could never replace presence. It could never replace kindness. It could never replace love. In the end, the thing that saved his family was not wealth, power, or success. It was a compassionate woman who chose to stay, 2 children brave enough to tell the truth, and a father who finally learned that the greatest gift he could give was simply being there.